Good afternoon, everybody. Welcome to the Ranting and Rolling podcast. I am Crash, also known as the Odd Crapple. This is the Message of Music series dedicated to Chester Bennington and Lincoln Park. Today we have a little bit of a switch up. I have had people in the music performance side of things for the past couple of episodes. Today's something special because we are combining music with structured academia. And I have one of my former music instructors from all the way back in middle school, which we won't say how many years ago that was because that'll make me feel really old. And we don't want to divulge how old I am. But you're only as young as you feel, but I feel old. Nancy Armstrong, and I have to admit, it's very weird for me to say that because even at 35, I still feel like I should not be referring to you by your first name. It's so weird to me. And I was struggling with that all week, and I was like, okay, how do I introduce her and not sound completely disrespectful? So I wanted to have you on just because, I think music in general has an impact on whoever listens to it. And I think that the most important time to really be exposed to music is in one's formative years. And you have taught all ages. So I'm curious to have this conversation and see what we can learn about, your relationship with music and the relationship that you have seen your students develop with music. So I'll let you introduce yourself and we will kind of proceed from there.
Thanks, Ryan, and thanks for having me on. I'm from Kingston, New York originally, and I graduated from Kingston High School and went to Potsdam, got a bachelor's degree in music, and then I got a counseling degree from Plattsburgh after that. And then I got my first teaching job in Glens Falls in 1973 and taught there for 38 years. And I taught most of my time in Glens Falls in the middle school, and that was by far my favorite age. 8th grade is my favorite age to teach. And that's where I believe I had you for the rock and roll class. Is that correct? Rock and roll.
Possibly. The thing that confused me in middle school was that we had a different music instructor each year. So it's not like we could get used to somebody. We were switched off each year. So I believe I may have had you in 8th grade.
I don't know. I know, it depended on the schedule because some music teachers taught high school, so they only had mornings or afternoons free, and I taught elementary for a while, half day, and then middle school for a while. So anyway, my background is in music. I loved it. I continue to be in Glens Falls community theater shows, and I played for the Glens Falls high school shows, and last year I played for the Queensbury high school show. So I'm sticking around in music, but being a grandmother mostly. Yeah.
Now, coming from the academic side of things, when you are a music instructor in the environment of structured academia, do you need to have an education degree?
Yes, in a public school. In a private school, you do not. No, you don't have to have one. But you do have to have music education. You can't have a music performance degree.
No. Can you explain to me what the difference is in putting together a curriculum for music instruction under the umbrella of structured academia? Because for me, my view of it is music is something that people relate to individually and organically. So it feels like putting or sticking music or any art form, you know, for that matter, under the umbrella of structured academia is counterproductive, because it almost seems like you are forced to present the material in a structured way, which with art it doesn't feel like that is natural.
Well, you have 20 weeks. We had 20 weeks in eighth grade. And the first 10 weeks, we had 10 weeks with eighth graders for a long time. And then all of a sudden they changed it up to 10 weeks in sixth grade of music and 20 weeks in eighth and no music in seventh. So we couldn't just flip the seventh grade curriculum over because seventh graders had it. And eighth graders are a different breed. They're really older acting when you get to eighth grade. It's just different. They're laid back and cooler.
Yeah.
And so I said to Connie's Weifel, I don't know if you had Mrs. Weifel.
I love Mrs. Weifel. She was awesome.
Yeah, she was. She was fun. Anyway, she and I decided to do a 10-week curriculum on our own, and it would be strictly rock, because the first 10 weeks of eighth grade was pretty basic, you know, heavier classical music and just things that we're supposed to teach. Well, then we came up with starting rock and roll in the early 50s. Actually, we did one day on music in the early 50s that wasn't rock, to show the kids what they would have had to listen to, because there was no such thing as rock and roll. And then we started around 55 with Bill Haley and the Comets and Rock Around the Clock. And then we hit, you know, Elvis Presley and Jerry Lee Lewis and all the 50s rocks. And then we decided to change the 60s up to Motown, California sound, British invasion, all of like the Bob Dylan and the folk music and the protest folk. So we had an actual curriculum that, you know, and of course the British, did I say the British invasion? We did the Beatles mostly in that. But that made kids like music. Up until that point, they'd say eighth grade music is like, oh God, I got to take that, you know, for 10 weeks. And then it was 20 weeks and they really rolled their eyes. And I used to just say to the kids, I think you'll like the last 10 weeks. Oh, and we did dances with them. We had dance days. And so it was fun. So we actually made up the curriculum. And Connie and I had extensive 33 albums. And we would just bring albums in and put them across the front of the chalkboard. And if I was doing Motown, I'd have all Diana Ross and Four Tops and Temptations and Stevie Wonder and Gladys Knight and Aretha Franklin. I mean, they would just be there. And believe it or not, I used to have to tell kids how to put a record on and show them how records worked. And that was kind of fun. And then occasionally I'd bring 45 in, like, and show them how that worked with a little center and talk about the speeds of it. And it was just very interesting. And I loved it because I would start a unit and kids would absolutely say, this is going to be the most disgusting 2 weeks for me, because I can't stand that kind of music. And then I'd say to them, well, guess what? You're stuck. You're going to listen to it for 2 weeks. And whether you like it at the end of the 2 weeks is fine. And then I would always bring up me in like science class and say, look, I have a whole year. I have a whole year of science. I am not strong in science. I can't say it's my favorite subject. And you're only 2 weeks in this week. You know, I try to always humor kids when they gave me grief, and I allowed them to give me a hard time, you know, as long as they were respectful. And so anyway, the rock and roll curriculum became one that I loved to teach, and everybody that came in, all the kids, they grew to have an appreciation of many kinds of music. And then we stopped in the 70s, but what allowed the kids to do music after the 70s was everyone had to do an oral report at the very end of the 10 weeks, and they could pick any group that they wanted from any decade, and as long as it was appropriate to play in school.
Right.
And so then if somebody wanted to do the Grateful Dead, or if they wanted to do country music, you know, a country group, whatever, it didn't matter. That's who they presented. And the other good thing about that was they would pick people that other people didn't like. And I'd nail the kids for that. I'd say, look, wouldn't it be a boring life if we all wore the same clothes and listened to the same music and like the same dances? I said, this is what life is about, you know, with diversity. So you just be respectful of everybody that comes in with their reports, even if you don't like that kind of music.
Right. Something I want to bring up for the people in the chat. If you are a former student of Mrs. Armstrong, I want you to put in the chat something that you remember learning from class. One of my very good friends, Tony Altizio, is actually in the chat. And he and I were talking about him remembering the Beatles unit, and he was very fond of that. So I wanted to bring that up. If you have any questions for Mrs. Armstrong, I don't know if she can see the chat, but if she cannot, I will relay questions to her. As something that I remember always hearing, and I still hear to this day, something I always remember hearing was when school budget time would come around, because of I've always heard that if students participated in a music or art type of instruction, that they would do better in their other core classes. But my question is, why, when like a school budget talks would come around, why would music and the arts be vulnerable to being eliminated?
It's because of the state mandates. The state mandates that every student in public schools in New York have to have 30 weeks of music at the middle school level. And so they can do away with a lot of teachers if that's the only thing. And, music teachers, because that's not an awful lot, because they don't really have to have a music teacher in the elementary. They could give kids 30 minutes of just planning time, since it's not state mandated. Teachers do have to have, it used to be 30 minutes a day of free time. And that's when the kids would go to library, art, music, phys ed. So they have to have 30 minutes, but the only time it's mandated is in middle school. So what that basically means is they could do away with all the elementary music teachers, or the music teachers in the elementary could bump the other teachers if they had been there longer.
Mm-hmm.
But it is, what always upset me about that is that a lot of kids do not do well in core subjects for whatever reason, or they don't care for them. They would come to music or art or phys ed and they would shine, and it would be like their favorite subject of the day. And they couldn't wait to get to one of those 3 classes. It seemed like music, art, or phys ed, and it was an outlet for them. And I think that sometimes administrators and people higher up just don't get that. Yeah. Every teacher would tell you that, though, basically. But not
to make a pun, because I don't know if you've actually, I don't know if you noticed the hat that I was wearing. It's one of our old.
No, I can't. Indians.
It's one of our old hats from when I was in school.
Nice.
You talk about the administration and the higher ups. One of the things that always fascinated me when I was in school was Mr. McGowan, the superintendent, while I was in school. He didn't seem like your typical run-of-the-mill administrator. He was always very heavily involved and he was very ever-present in the schools. Like, he did not hide in his office. So explain to me how important it is, from your perspective as an educator, to have somebody who seemingly would, well, obviously he didn't specifically, but administrators are known to hide in their office and not be, present for the things, the programs that they run. But explain to me, as a music educator, with somebody like him who was so ever present and visible to everybody, how important is that as an educator? Like, his accessibility.
Terrifically important. But I have found over the years, I have had probably 5 or 6 superintendents and 10 or 12 principals over the years. It's very important that they show interest, but they're human like the rest of us. Some of them are really phys ed minded. Some of them are music minded. I think they should force themselves at least to go to one concert a year, even if they don't have a child in it or care about it, just to
Hmm.
show support. And I agree. I really think that of the principals as well, because
Yeah.
you find that some principals go to concerts and support programs, and some don't as much. And I know some people, some principals actually like music more than phys ed, but
Hmm.
generally phys ed is the one that's given the most, you know, uh, I don't know.
Yeah. It
They're at
would.
more phys ed things than they are music things. But you know, when you teach elementary school, let me see, if you're doing 2 concerts a year for 4 elementary schools and 3 concerts a year for the middle school and the high school, uh, that's a lot of concerts for one person to go to. You know,
Hmm.
I think it's that's not fair to think that they would do that. If they could go to one or two for each one for each school, that would be nice. And then write a note to that teacher, because you know music teachers, like other teachers, work so hard. And when you prepare 120 kids for a choral concert, and you know you're trying to get white shirts for people that don't have white shirts, and black shoes and black skirts, and they're
Hmm.
dressing 5 minutes ahead of time, and there's a snowstorm and they can't get there, and you're trying to pick them up at their house because their parents aren't going to go to it. There's a lot that goes on behind the scenes.
Yeah.
And I think that when you actually see 120 kids in front of you and you pull it off, you're happy. You're happy for them, and they're happy, and you're happy that there's somebody there to see them that matters in the
Yeah.
schools. It's also very good for parents to see administrators and
Yes.
superintendents and assistant superintendents.
Going back to your, your days as a student. Um,
Mhm.
do you remember? Because I want to know from an early age, how early do you remember becoming interested in music? And actually, somebody in the chat wants to know who was the music teacher that inspired you growing up.
It was actually my parents. My mother was a phenomenal piano player, and she never would play in public. She played by ear. You'd say,
Hmm.
play Stardust, play Moonlight in Vermont, play the A Train, and she played it. She could play anything. My father was a banjo player. He used to play in banjo bands. And
Hmm.
so between the two of them, I always heard music in the house. My grandfather lived across the street. When I was a little girl, he would say to me, play Carolina in the morning and play Darktown Strutter's Ball and I'm Forever Blowing Bubbles. And I remember my mother teaching them to me with one finger. And they had an old player piano across the street. And I would play it for them. And then when I got older, I remember accompanying the song One Little Candle for the 6th grade chorus in my number 5 Mahar school for the music teacher. And then when I got into junior high, I actually started to be the accompanist in junior high. And
Hmm.
then when I got into senior high, we had double baby grand pianos. And a guy named Jim Esposito would play one piano opposite me, and they would put the ends of the piano together. And it was a it was a tough choir, and the music was beautiful, and I love that. And then so I think Leonard Stein was fabulous, and then I had Margaret Rosa and Margaret Brannigan in high school, and I think the high school was fabulous. I mean, it was a beautiful music program. It was.
As going back to what we were talking about earlier with especially within the structure of the middle school where the kids would have a different instructor each year.
Mhm.
Were there similar? What were some of the similarities and differences between yourself, Mrs. Weifel, and Mrs. Granger? And were there things that like tips that you shared with each other or good
Mhm.
memories that you have with each other?
Oh, I have great memories with all of them. I think the best thing was when we did dance day. We would put the 3 8th grades together. We had them the same period, and we would just spread the chairs out in Mrs. Granger's room. And I, along with all the other teachers, would teach them the 60s dances. And we would do the pony and the twist and the shimmy and the swim and all these crazy dances. And then uh, other good memories, oh, I don't know. We did choruses, different levels in chorus. I played for Pam Granger's chorus.
Hmm.
I think that what happened was it was good to teach about the same curriculum. So when
Hmm.
I taught eighth grade, Connie and I did the same curriculum, and then Pam came in later, and then she picked it up too. So all of the kids were really on the same page. Then at
Um,
Yeah, pretty
go ahead. Go
much.
ahead. Yeah.
No, I was going to say, and then we had our specialties. So in eighth grade, my specialty was the Beatles. It was a 2 week
Mhm.
one. Pam's specialty was theater. And I can't remember what Connie taught for 2 weeks, or Jerry Lynn Tita. I can't remember what they taught, but we would alternate the kids. So I would
Hmm.
teach the Beatles for 2 weeks, 2 weeks, 2 weeks. Pam would teach theater 2 weeks, 2 weeks. And I can't, oh, I know what, it was Jerry Lynn Tita, and she did 80s music.
Hmm.
She did an 80s music curriculum, 70 boy bands and girl bands. It was Jerry Lynn. And that was probably the most fun thing. And it was
Yeah.
great for the kids to get into a different room for 2 weeks, and just, we had a blast doing that, flipping everybody around.
Um, I
They're great teachers, all of
I
them.
would I would say that even if two people are fundamentally opposed with certain things, that there is a certain camaraderie if they share the same interest in music. So I'm curious,
Totally.
um, if you had to describe the camaraderie between you and the Miss Weifel and Mrs. Granger, how would you describe that type of camaraderie, considering the fact that you taught the same thing, but
Hmm.
you taught it individually, um,
Hmm.
and you were able to teach it within a way that you could connect with to help students connect with. What was the camaraderie like between you and the other instructors?
Great. We really got along well.
Yeah.
And if we didn't agree on something, we let it go. Just say, well,
Hmm.
if you really want to teach that and you think that's important, fine, then I'll do this for 5 weeks because I think this is important. But basically we really, got along very well, and
Hmm.
we supported each other. The whole music department did. I mean, when
Yeah.
I started, it was Stan Garricky. Then I played in a band with him around Glens Falls. We played, it was fun. And then it was Dick Caselli, and then Kevin Belosa, Kathy Hackert. I mean, it was, I'm talking about the older teachers, and it was a lot of great times.
I'm I don't know why, but Belosa, that sounds really familiar. I don't know why that sounds familiar. Um, was there a teacher, a male? I think believe it was a male teacher. His last name started with an F, and I can't remember who it was.
Music?
What is that?
Was he a music teacher?
I believe so. Um,
Mr. DeTore was a great music teacher. He was in Sanford Street years ago.
was
Tom
there?
DeTore.
No, this was middle school and high school, and I believe his last name started with an F. I for some reason, and he's probably the name I'm coming up with probably isn't music, but um, was Ferdelli a music teacher, or
No,
was he academia?
I don't remember him for
Okay,
Delhi. No, I don't remember that
he was
name.
probably academia versus arts. Um,
Right.
it's I'm getting on up there in years, and it's
Ryan,
yeah.
Ryan, I'm double your age. Okay. Knock it off.
uh, it,
Stop. I got you doubled.
I know, but um, as far as your personal relationship with music, um, you've you've seen the evolution of music from when rock and roll became a thing, and
Mhm.
so how has your relationship with music evolved uh, in, you know, in the time that music itself has evolved. Like, can you explain that?
Are we talking, we're just talking rock and roll. Okay.
Well, no,
I have,
not all music. Like,
okay. Well, country's become very popular in the last 20 or 30 years. I mean, country
mhm,
really, and in the 50s and 60s, I don't think it was that popular. Now it's really popular. And
mhm,
rap has become really popular. And I think a lot of the music, to me, would be very boring if you weren't watching something visual with it.
mhm,
I mean, if I'm looking at these awesome costumes and fabulous dancers and lightning and thunder in the back of them and acrobats, I mean, with a lot of the rock and roll kinds of things. And I think that sometimes if I were not to look at all that, I would think the music would be boring. But that's just me. That's how
mhm,
I perceive it. A lot of it, and I perceive a lot of the new music as being repetitious and lyric heavy. Now, I found out over my years of teaching that everybody likes music for different reasons. Some people like beautiful melodies with beautiful lyrics. Some people like rhythmic lyrics, like rap stuff. Some people like rhythms in music because it's danceable. Some people like harmony because they love groups like the Beach Boys or Mamas and the Papas, or who are the girls? China Phillips. Oh my gosh, I can't think of
oh,
them.
Wilson Phillips.
Yeah, Wilson Phillips. I mean, if you love, thank you. If you love music for harmony, then you're going to like a certain kind of music. I feel
Mhm,
like the music right now, a lot of the popular songs are more rhythmic and lyric driven.
mhm.
And I may be wrong about that, because when I put my music on, I got an Alexa for Christmas last year, and I'll sit down, I'll say, could you play me 40s jazz standards? Could you play me classic rock? Could you play Beatles music? So I go to the old ones. So the only time I hear new music is when I have my grandchildren in the car and they make me put on the station that plays new music. And I'll say,
Uh,
do you really like that? And they'll say, yeah, Nan, we do it. I'll say, don't you like it? I'll say, no, give me a little time to listen to it and I'll let you know.
in the context of something you were speaking about earlier, kids bringing in music um, to either play or talk about, as long as it was something acceptable that they could play. How do you balance that when you have a genre like rap music that
Hmm.
isn't generally acceptable in certain
Oh, yeah.
environments? How do you balance that? Because I'm wondering um, how you have witnessed your students connecting to music, because they all, I mean, obviously you have this unique ability to see kids coming from all sorts of backgrounds. So I would imagine, while you are trying to expose them to certain genres of music, you
Hmm.
yourself are also learning about music that you maybe didn't know existed. So how do you do that
Hmm.
balance when there's a societal push to not accept certain music in certain environments? And how do you see, or what is something you've witnessed as far as students relating to certain music?
I I think I'm sad when I see students that I know don't go home to a good home life, and I see the kind of music they bring in, and I know that happens. I
Mm-hmm.
see that, and I just hope that things get better for them. I mean, schools can do just so much. As
Yeah.
far as rap music goes, I used to make a joke of it. They would say to me, the kids, I want to bring in this. I want not to bring in. I'd like to bring in a CD of this rapper, or at the time it could have been a tape. Or I told
Yeah.
them they could bring in a visual, you know, a VCR tape or VHS or whatever it was called for the VCR.
Yep.
And some kids, I would be looking at the class, and then I had kids in the back going, and I'd say to the kid, Joey, is that guy acceptable? Does he have any bad words in his music? Is he acceptable? And then he'd go, sure, Mrs. Armstrong. And then the kids in the back would be going. so, so then I'd say, I'll tell you what, I'm going to check with Mrs. Tita because she's up on all the latest music. Or I'm going to go home and I'm going to, there was no such thing as Googling things. I'm going to check into this. And if I find out from a teenager this person's not acceptable, excuse me, for your oral report, then I'm going to come back tomorrow and tell you to change it.
Mm-hmm.
That's how I work with that. But I think a lot of rap music, I mean, I used to actually teach rap, the beginnings of it. When I did 6th grade curriculum, I did it all by genres of music, and they loved it. And I tried to pick one that they would love. I would do like 3 a day, and I would show music from that genre. And I did do, what is the very first rap song? Rapper's Delight.
Yep.
Right? 1971.
Yep.
Rapper's Delight.
Sugar Hill Gang.
So I would do Sugar Hill Gang, Rapper's Delight. So I would play that. And then for my second rap song, I did a comedy. I did a comedy genre with Weird Al.
Yeah. Oh, I love Weird Al. Actually, one of my very best friends, the reason he started listening to music was because of Weird Al.
Oh gosh, he's so clever, so bright.
Yeah.
So then the other rap song I would do, I actually brought in the words and made the kids rap along to Weird Al's. And what was it that it was a rap song by Weird Al. And he took, obviously, it was a parody. He took another song.
It was probably Amish Paradise.
Was it Amish Paradise? No, it wasn't that one. But I can't remember, but it wasn't that one. But it was seems like it was to was it to a Star Wars one, or what was it to?
Was it Yoda?
Yes.
It was Yoda.
That was what it was.
Yes. I actually didn't know about that song until much later. But the first rap song I had heard Weird Al do was Amish Paradise, which was obviously a parody of Gangster's Paradise.
Yes.
And that, especially with the music video, that blew me away. Now, in the context of music videos, I'm curious if you know this, because I know this, but I want to see if you do.
Probably not.
Do you know what the very first music video was on MTV?
No.
Video Killed the Radio Star by the Buggles.
Hello? I'm still clueless to it, Ryan. Don't know. No.
Yeah, I have very random and sometimes irrelevant knowledge of music, but it's always fun to just kind of pull that, because I think trivia like that is just it's a conversation starter, and I think that it's especially when it's music trivia. Music in and of itself is there to start a conversation. And I'm curious, regardless of what era it comes from, do you have a certain song that you can recall back to that maybe started an important conversation?
In teaching a lot, especially when I got to the protest songs. I start with the folk music, and we would do like the Kingston Trio and go into Peter, Paul, Mary. But then when we got into the Vietnam and Bob Dylan stuff and Joni Mitchell and Collins, and I don't think I got into James Taylor too much, but I remember, we would get into things then, and sometimes they were political. And a lot of times in the Motown unit, we would talk about how unfair things were in the Black community always, in the Motown unit. And that's how that actually got started, the Motown records, because all of these talented groups couldn't get a break.
Right.
Because of the color, I have one funny thing that's off the mark that I have to tell you.
Okay.
Jimmer Fredette, as you know, Jimmer.
Yep.
He was in my 8th grade music class. And when everybody had to do a report, he said, can I do my brother TJ Fredette? And I said,
TJ is one of my very best friends. Like that dude is probably one of the coolest human beings on the planet.
well, I had I think I had TJ and Lindsay in class as well as Jimmer. So I said, and what does TJ do that you want to bring your brother, or no, that you want to do your brother instead of, you know, whatever group? And he said, he's a rapper. And I said, really? And I said, you're going to have an easy report to do if I say yes on this. So I said, the only way I will let you do a report on TJ Fredette is if he comes in and actually raps for us. So he stood up, did a report on his brother, and TJ came in and rapped for us. It was very cool.
Do you remember, I mean, obviously you probably remember, Julie Marcantonio?
Sure.
Her son Ryan was in a rap group with TJ, and that's how this was in my drinking days when I was in my early 20s. Do you remember a kid that was in my class? His name was Namdi Nelson.
I don't remember him. No.
Sometimes
kids don't get me for music. They would get Mrs. Weifel or Mrs. Kavanaugh or Mrs. Ranger. So that's why I don't see every kid.
Well, Namdi was in a group with Ryan Marcantonio and TJ Fredette after we were all 21 and able to go out to the bars. So I actually got to see all of them perform together at one of the bars that I had frequented. And it was just so cool to see people I knew actually going for something that interested them and succeeding at it. It was really cool.
It was. And TJ was cool and Jimmer's cool. I mean, they were good boys. And then the other one that really is a phenomenal talent is Margot Massero. I mean,
yes, I know the name. I don't know her personally.
Oh, you've got to go and listen to her online. She is just.
I've listened to her music for years. I actually heard about her before I moved here to Virginia. I knew about her. I just don't know her. I just don't know her personally. Do you remember? Because I know that he was very music oriented. I know he was more of a performer than he was a musician. I think Jordan Bell.
Oh, sure. He was a drummer as well, right? He was a.
I believe so. Yeah, I believe he did drums and guitar. He actually, the last I knew, he actually was living out in either Los Angeles or Hollywood, doing music stuff out in California. And for a number of years, he and I were very close.
I think he went to school for music industry, didn't he? Didn't he go to school?
Yes, he did.
And I know Potsdam's got a great program.
Yep.
A lot of kids, do well and then end up in California because that's where the music's produced.
Yeah.
A lot of it, I think. I'll tell you who else I had in school that was way before your time. Was a guy named James Elliott, and he was a very, very phenomenal guitar player.
Yeah.
Did you ever hear of him? Well, he ended up leaving and going to Interlochen. Which is very hard to get into. And he actually had a rock and roll name called Jimmy Riot. And I think he played with, oh gosh, who's Piano Man? Who's the Piano Man?
Billy Joel.
Yeah, Billy Joel's band. And his daughter, he played for his daughter's band. And now he's settled now, but I think he was called Jimmy Riot. And he used to play guitar like for me when I would be doing a rock song, in a course, I need an accompanist, and he's a fabulous guitar player as well.
Yeah,
somebody in
the chat wants to know what was the most inspiring part of teaching kids who may have been struggling to find their way.
The best thing is that when I made a relationship with them, or if they were really talented and they got solos, once a kid got a solo, or once they shined, if I did if I did a Michael Jackson medley and we all danced and I had 4 kids do some special dancing, the minute that kid who didn't have any kind of ties with many people did anything special, that child was looked at totally differently in a different light. And all of a sudden, kids would respect them and pay attention to them more. That made me happy. And the other thing that really makes me happy is when I go to a store and somebody says, "Hi, Mrs. Armstrong, I love that unit. And, how are you doing?" And then I say, "Well, how are you? And do you have children?" And blah, blah, blah. And when they'll remember one thing. And that was a lot of, fun for me. And it's fun for, I don't know. I just love kids. I love to go out, and I really remember them. And I think it was most fun to have the children of kids. All of a sudden they had the second generation.
Yeah.
And that was fun too. And I could look at kids and say, "Is so and so your mother, or is so and so your father?" They would be like identical.
Yeah.
I mean, there's no question that was the same family. But I just love kids, and I love them to love music.
Without using specifics, because I don't want to put anybody's personal business, out there. I'm curious, when you were able to witness a student developing a relationship with music that seemed to be healthy for them, like seemed to help them a lot. Like, what was your reaction when you saw a student developing a relationship with music that seemed to, make them healthier?
I would actually have them come in after school on like a Tuesday or Thursday when we were there, and I would only be giving kids tests that missed tests or helping them with an oral report. And I'd say, "Come on in," and I would give them a lot more special time, or I'd say, whatever group they were interested in, we'd look them up on the computer and we'd find out more stuff about them, or I would just try to give them a little bit extra time and then send them off on their own and say, "Look, why don't you go and look up this song by this person? You'd love it tonight." And I think I would just bring them in and give them a little more, extra time.
I'm not going to be presumptuous, but I think I am right in saying I think your son is in the chat.
Could be.
He wants to know what decade of rock and roll music worked best for choral, and what was your favorite decade of music?
Ooh, tough one. My favorite decade of music for choral was unquestionably the 60s. I mean, because so much came out. Michael Jackson stuff was hot. If you want to do a Beatles medley, I mean, I did a Crosby, Stills, Nash and Young medley that the kids loved. I did a Simon and Garfunkel medley, and it was all 60s stuff. And what was the other question he asked me? So, my favorite was probably late 60s and early 70s, because I think looking back, I loved Motown to dance to and to laugh with, but my favorite music is classic rock. I love classic rock. And I also love jazz rock. I love like Blood, Sweat and Tears in Chicago.
He just responded in the chat and he goes, "I knew it." Somebody else wants to know, what is your favorite song you did with your chorus, and what song did you never want to hear your children sing again?
Never. I never liked the Little Mermaid songs. I tried to do them. Disney's gonna shoot me down for that one, but I tried to do some Little Mermaid songs, and it's like you got into the song and it had all of these fish in it, and you had to remember the fish and this and that and that, and they could never get it straight. And I said, "You know what? This is the worst song I ever picked. We got to do it because it's on the program." And I said, "And I can't help you out with it because I can't remember the words either." And so I just tried to, when I was playing piano, mouth the words to all of them because we couldn't get them. And there was a song from Hairspray that I did in the middle school from a Hairspray medley that the words were equally as tough. I don't
Yeah.
remember what song it was, but it was a Hairspray song. It was nasty. It was
Um,
nasty.
what was your favorite song you did with your chorus?
It was the Crosby, Stills, Nash and Young medley. I love
Yeah.
that, and it was a lot of songs. Although I did like Bridge Over Troubled Water.
Hmm.
That was a good arrangement. I like Dust in the Wind.
Oh
And then
yeah.
and then I did Broadway, a lot of Broadway tunes, but people that know me are going to be surprised to know that I really like rock and roll better than Broadway for my chorus.
Something I'm curious about, what your thoughts are. A lot of songs that maybe you grew up with and a lot of songs that I ended up growing up with are now being featured in TV series and movies. So I know that you are no longer teaching, but when you would have a student that would come in with a song that they had just heard, but you knew it from a different decade before
Right,
before it was involved in
right.
a movie or a TV show, if they related it to that TV show, but you actually explained to them that
Hmm.
the song itself was much older, like
Hmm.
what was that sort of reaction like on their part? Like, can you remember specific reactions?
Yeah, I can. And I think like one movie you might be talking about is like Shrek, right? When Shrek came
Yeah.
out, did they have tons of old rock songs in it?
Yes. I believe there's a song called I'm a Believer. I
Yeah,
was
and
it was
oh,
a Yeah, was it
Monkeys.
by it was by the Monkees, and that is something that people associate with Shrek a lot. Um,
Right.
and
And
then there's a show on TV called Supernatural, and I believe Carry On Wayward Son is on that show. And I cannot, I mean, and I go to Comic Con, so I see all of these different fandoms of, people who like different shows and different movies. So when I see when I see the people in the Supernatural fandom and they are singing that song, but they get very argumentative when you try and tell them that that song is much older than that TV show, it
oh my
it ma-
gosh.
it makes me want to wring their neck.
Oh, I shouldn't have said that. No, I think that Carry On My Wayward Son is one of the best songs. And then when that guitar part comes in, wah 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 wah. Oh, I
Yep.
know. Yeah, that it's great. Now I've totally lost it. What did you start to ask me? I got thinking about Carry On. I don't even know what I'm supposed to be thinking about right now, Ryan.
Well, no, I think the last question I had asked you was what was your favorite song to do with chorus, and then you said
Oh,
you did answer that.
yeah, I did.
Um,
And I like they like, you want to know what one they like the best? The
sure.
Beatles. The
Yeah.
Beatles.
Yeah.
They loved the Beatles medleys, and there were many of them around, many. And so I did more than one, and they were a lot of fun. And they always ended with "Let It Be" or "Imagine," even though "Imagine" was a Lennon song.
Yep.
You know,
Um, is there any way, because it seems like people can relate to music and the arts in general in their own way, is there any way that within structured academia, not like music and the arts, but structured academia, is there a way that you would suggest to educators to maybe incorporate musical references into their lesson plans so people might be able to do better in those core classes?
that was actually brought up at one point years ago, and I think that we go in waves in education, in reading, do it this way, do it that way. In math, now we have the new way to teach math, and I think that that was brought up at one point, that we were trying to meet with social studies teachers and math teachers and trying to find out how we can, and for some reason it doesn't pan out. I think we all have too much in our own subject, and if something were to come up, it just never really panned out. They tried it many times. I remember
Um,
trying to do it, and you know, Yeah, I just don't think it ever worked too much.
Well,
I don't know.
one of the things that always was very strong with me is I had a love for history class, and
Hmm.
the reason was that before I was born, my father was a substitute history teacher, so history has always been something that's kind of been in my blood. But as far as the connection between music and academia, one of the major songs that helped me in history class was We Didn't Start the Fire by Billy Joel. All of the
Hmm.
historical references in there helped me later on in high school, helped me understand a lot of what Mr. Shaver and Mr. Conduzio and Mr. Doc and Mr. Moynihan, all of them, it helped me, understand what they were teaching me. So, how important is it for people to really listen to the message that music is sending?
Oh, it's really important. Other songs have taught things. I mean, like when you have primary kids, you teach counting songs, you teach ABC songs. In the fourth grade, I taught 50 Nifty United States,
Hmm.
Alabama, Alaska, Arizona, Arkansas, Colorado, whatever, Connecticut, and it kept going. And I remember Mrs. Austin said, for anybody that can tell me the 50 states, I'll give you a Stewart's ice cream. Make your own ice cream. So I didn't tell her that I had this song, and I brought those fourth graders in, and oh my gosh, talk about kids wanting to learn a song. They learned that no time flat, and they one at a time went in and sang it to her, and she goes, "Thanks a lot." So there are some songs that are teachable. I think I don't know so much now. I think I don't see it so much. I mean, I think they represent things like Vietnam War,
Hmm.
but actually teachable songs, I don't know how many are out there, to be honest with you. And as I said, I don't listen to current music so much. So I don't know what's out there. I know you can learn from a lot of songs from musicals, more like Hamilton, you,
Hmm.
you know, and but I don't know really what's out there as far as rock and roll goes.
Um,
Can't see that.
as far as connecting with music for the sake of health, like mental health, um, what have you ever witnessed your students becoming mentally and emotionally healthier because of the music they started listening to? Because obviously, like I told you, um, the reason I started this series was because of my connection to Lincoln Park and Chester Bennington,
Mhm.
for various reasons. So I'm curious, um, what your thoughts are as far as use music therapy. I'll simplify it and put it as music therapy, and using music as a therapeutic outlet.
I think music touches your soul, period. And I think if somebody doesn't like some kind of music, I would question them seriously. I
Hmm.
mean, because there's got to be a kind of music for everybody.
Hmm.
I can't imagine people not liking some kind of music, and I know it makes people happy. And to find the
Hmm.
kind of music that makes you happy, you just have to play it. And if you play an instrument, you're really even luckier, because if I feel like I'm depressed in any way and I go play piano, I
Hmm.
play loud piano, and I might play heavy piano. I might play a Beethoven piano piece, and I just get happy, or I let my emotions go. And I have a couple art teacher friends, and they are doodlers. And when they're frustrated or what, I mean, the things that they doodle are unbelievable. And I imagine it's the same thing with dancers.
Hmm.
Um, but I think that kids and people should find what makes them happy and then listen to that, because oh, I have a great story for you. This is a
Okay.
really good.
Okay.
This is at one point in my life, I knew somebody that worked in the prison system,
Hmm.
and it was a medium maximum security prison system. And
Okay.
this was way back in the 70s. And I was told that when the inmates were anxious and they were worried about them, the inmates, they would play Lou Rawls music.
Okay.
And they would
I'm
pipe it
familiar.
through, and they would pipe it through the prison system because it was very soothing and everybody loved Lou Rawls. And
Hmm.
I love Lou Rawls music. It's soulful and it's beautiful.
Yeah.
And I mean, music can touch our souls in a bad way too. And like if
Oh,
I go
absolutely.
someplace and I hear heavy metal music or death metal or whatever it's called, it's like, I've got to get out of there. It makes me literally anxious and nervous.
Yeah.
I mean,
I personally love heavy metal music.
yeah, I know
Um,
that. I
but
remember that.
I do have to be in the mood to listen to it, because I think you listen to certain genres of music based on your mood, and I think that's why music is so diverse and so important, because there literally exists a song to explain every emotion that the human soul has.
You are right, because the people that write that music are writing it for a reason, and they felt,
Hmm.
we all feel anguish or whatever it is. It's great, and I agree with you. And then going back to the melodies, harmonies, rhythms, and
Hmm.
instrumentations and lyrics, then we go to that part of it that we like about that music, besides the
Um,
lyrics, whether it's soothing or slow or rhythmic.
Two more things. One, I'm curious, not to get too personal because I don't want to, put you in a vulnerable spot. But if I know it's human at any age to kind of have those days where you get stuck in your head. And is there a go-to song that you have if you get stuck in your head? Is there a go-to song that kind of breaks that block for you and kind of gets you back into feeling more like yourself?
I think when I play the piano, it would be all of the songs that my parents played.
Hmm.
It'd be like Misty, Moonlight in Vermont, all the Girl from Ipanema, 60 songs that my mother played a lot. And I would play, they soothe me. Send in the Clowns soothes me.
Hmm.
There's certain songs that soothe me. But I got to tell you, this has nothing to do with music. What really soothes me is when is getting outside and taking a walk or
Hmm.
swimming or doing some physical exercise. I think that it's getting away from music, but that's why you probably see people with headphones on, because music helps them do two things at once. And
Yeah.
but yeah, I think that probably that. And when I sit down to just read the paper, that's why I said sometimes I put on old jazz standards, because you start thinking about your past more the older you
Hmm.
get.
Yeah.
You know, that's what.
Um, because of and I want to kind of end on this because I want, you are an educator, and therefore you are somebody who has a great deal of influence on people. So I kind of want to end on this note with the current social times that we're facing, where there's a lot of division and there's a lot of, I want to say, properly, but also sometimes misguided anger. Going back to something you were talking about with the early days of protest music, with all of the protests that we are seeing today, especially for, the Black Lives Matter and all of that, what is the message that you would send to them about embracing protest music, in the sense of listening to the message that protest music gives, so that they can properly craft their message? Because when I think of something like Black Lives Matter, I go back to the song Black or White by Michael Jackson. And I wish that the people who were protesting now, kind of embraced more of the old protest music, so that they, not that they, I don't want it to influence their message in the sense that of changing their message, but I want them to be able to articulate it better. And I think that embracing or older protest music will help them craft their message better so that people who don't currently understand them will. So for anybody in their formative years right now who is out there protesting, what is your message to them about embracing music that would help them convey their message?
I think of the song Abraham, Martin, and John.
Hmm.
Did you ever hear that song?
I know
That's
I know the song. I don't know if I've ever heard it.
well, that's about the three. They were all killed, but I think that I don't know. I believe that Black lives do matter. I support it, and I believe that Martin Luther King, set the best example of how things should be changed. And I know that they weren't changed in a timely fashion, but I certainly hope that people can continue to protest in a peaceful fashion, and the people that everybody listens to them now, and that really everybody moves on what they're protesting about, because it certainly is time
Yeah.
for change. It
When
really
when
is change.
when you're somebody who has a wide range of influence, is it should that person accept that they have responsibility to the people who are influenced by them?
I think I thought about this the other day. I heard a long time ago, and I believe it. If you live in the past, you're depressed. If you
Hmm.
live in the future, you're anxious. And if you can live in the present, that's the best place to be. And I feel like I live in the present. And in answer to your question, my present right now is my three grandchildren and my family. So
Hmm.
I think that I am so involved in my present, not as a teacher, not as an educator. And I just think that I don't see myself as someone who has this influence, because where I am right now, I don't even think of myself as an educator right now. Isn't that funny? That's like my other life. And now I'm
Hmm.
a grandma. And so I don't know what I could really do to influence people, because I don't feel like I'm at that point. If I were still teaching, then I would have to think about your question more.
Well, I think I'm more convinced that the person in the chat is your son Adam. Um,
He
I
probably is.
want to I want to ask Adam if you don't mind answering. Um, Based on what your mom just said, as far as her not thinking that she is still an influence, how do you feel she is an influence as a person outside of being a former educator? I'm interested to see his answer because I think that regardless of what your career or your job is, I think that everybody has the ability to influence other people. I don't think your career or your employment is, dictates that. So it surprises me that you don't see yourself necessarily as an influence any longer because you're no longer an educator.
That's because I'm not in the classroom, Rye.
Uh
It's
huh.
because I'm not in the classroom to actually verbalize what I feel. Because as a teacher, I always said what I thought. I mean,
Hmm.
I really did. I was right out there. And it was really fine for every kid to be right out there back. And that's what life is about, communication, right? If we can't
Absolutely.
communicate to each other, then what good is it? That's why I got along with kids for the most part, and they got along with me because we just let it all out And I think that if I were in the classroom right now, I would have a lot more influence. But being a nanny, playing on blocks on the floor and reading books, I don't think of myself anymore as having that place to have influence.
Mm-hmm.
That's all.
Adam just responded. He said she is the biggest influence on everyone she meets.
Oh,
She genuinely lives her life for other people.
well, thank you.
Um, Lastly, just absolute last
Mhm.
thought. What is one song lyric that you always go to that just kind of puts you in that good mood?
Uh, huh. What is one song lyric? I don't know because I think it's more playing the piano that puts me in the good mood. It's doing it.
Mm-hmm.
And I mean, like MacArthur's Park is
Mm-hmm.
my favorite song to play
Mm-hmm.
because it gets into that really loud da 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 da. And when I sit down and play that, it just makes me feel so free and in such a good mood. And I don't know of any lyrics. I'm not as much of a lyrics person as I am a harmony rhythm person and instrumental person. I mean,
Adam just said, "Ain't no mountain high enough."
oh my gosh, I do like that song. Thanks, Dad. He's
Well,
right. I do like
this
that song. I love that song.
yeah, this was
Yeah.
fun. I'm really glad we got to have this
Uh,
conversation because I think it was a necessary deviation from what I've done in other episodes because
mhm.
I don't think enough people understand how music is presented in an academic uh, format. And
Right.
listening to music as long as I have, I don't know if I really ever understood the process that goes into including music and the arts in general into academia because music and the arts have to be something very personal and very individual. So it's really hard to structure music and the arts inside of academia because they want you to teach certain things certain ways, and it's like you can't do that with art. So there's a noticeable struggle there, and it's really nice to understand now how music educators deal with that struggle.
Well, let me just say one thing. When
Okay.
you take phys ed, they present, I mean, ping pong, arm wrestling, football, whatever they present, all these different things. And then kids kind of find maybe something that they love doing, in phys ed. Then they go to art and they work with clay and they work with watercolors and they work with oils and they do sketches and they do dimensional things and they make things out of fabrics and they do all these cool things. Then they go to music and they listen to Irish music and they listen to rap music and they listen to rock music and classic music and all these kinds of music. And that all of our teachers that teach the arts are hoping that we are giving them one thing out of the 10, 20, 30 things we're teaching them that they will find and have that outlet and be able to carry them through life. So when they do need to have some solace and peace, that they can go to that thing that they learned from that art teacher or that phys ed teacher and go play golf and go play adult volleyball or go and take your violin out and play violin music. I mean, it's you or go and listen to the kind of music you love. I love Jethro Tull. What do you think of that? I
Wow.
think Jethro Tull really is one of my fun music to listen to. I listen
Yeah.
to him a lot. I mean, and I just respect that the flute playing in it. I just love to hear that. So I think I'm a diverse listener. I am
Yeah.
pretty much. But I think that as a role of an art, music, phys ed teacher, that's what we are trying to do. We are trying to expose every kid to so many different things so that they can find one that brings them happiness and joy.
Yeah. And I think music and art teachers understand more than any other person how important it is to maintain that human connection.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that we need to really start looking toward our music and art, educators,
Mm.
to, guide us into kind of reconnecting with each other.
I agree. They're sensitive subjects, and they're soulful, and I don't know, they reach the heart some way.
Yeah.
The art do, and that's why they're so important in schools,
Yeah.
especially during this COVID stuff, when everybody's going to be 6 feet apart, and it's going to be tough on these little kids.
I was having a
So,
discussion with my mom as far as, the kids going back to school because of what I was seeing on the news. And I know that it's a serious thing, but I did say, at least the teachers are getting somewhat of what they asked for. They're getting smaller class sizes.
oof.
So, I mean, it is kind of a net benefit in that way. But yeah, it's going to be a really strange transition going forward. So I think that we need to embrace music and the arts to still remember how important it is to keep that connection with each other.
Oh, totally. That's their outlets. I think I'm thinking elementary now, because I'm thinking
Yeah,
as a grandma. That is their outlet to sit and draw or jump or sing, play drums. I mean, whatever it is. I think it's really a necessity right now.
yeah.
I hope
Well,
everything goes.
thank you for doing this. I had
Thank
a
you,
blast.
Ryan. I
I
did
do
too.
want to say this. If Adam is still in the chat, I don't know if he is, but I do want to say this. The next time I am up in New York, I think the three of us should go to dinner.
Oh, I'll treat you. That would be fun. My
Well, I
treat.
mean, oh, well, I appreciate that, but I mean, I don't know if I know Adam personally, but based on how you have spoken about him, I'd love to meet him. So I definitely hope that we can all get together and have a great conversation.
That would be great. And Ryan, listen to him on YouTube.
I definitely will.
Okay. And
Actually, you know what I'll do? I'll actually put his YouTube video in the information below this video when it goes
oh,
up.
great.
I'll put his link in the bottom so people can watch it.
Thank you very much.
I
Okay.
will
And
talk to
thanks.
you soon.
And call me when you come up north.
I will.
Thanks. Bye bye, Ryan.
Bye bye.